Welcome to Workplace Whispers with Dr. Olufemi Ogunlowo, where we tackle the most pressing issues in work, business, and human capital. Well, Dr. Ogunlowo is a seasoned HR expert and CEO of Strategic Outsourcing Limited with decades of experience navigating workforce management. Well, now, on this episode, let's talk about unionism in the workplace. Can unionism truly serve both employers and employees? And then under what circumstance can it be both beneficial to employers and to employees? Lots of questions right here on the show today. Well, to help us explore this, we are joined by Mr. Remi Adeboyega, an award-winning HR expert, business leader, and trusted advisor across public and private sectors. Now, as CEO of Workmen and Talent Limited, his work has shaped national HR interventions and labor strategies across Nigeria. This is a conversation about leadership, trust, and reimagining the future of labor unions. I'm Praise Mba. Well, welcome to Workplace Whispers.
Thank you, Praise. Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And sorry you had to travel all the way, but thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Ogunlowo.
So they say everyone has a constitutional right. And of course, freedom of association is one of such rights. And which means that unionism is a constitutional right. Is that correct?
That is so correct. In fact, beyond the Constitution is an inalienable right of human beings to be able to move. God created us as social beings, not as individuals.
So in the workplace, therefore, the concept of unionism is not us versus them.
Absolutely. It should not be us versus them. But often it gets to that when it's not properly practiced or when people don't understand the essence of what they're doing.
So what would be the proper practice of?
Well, the first place we have to start from is to understand the nature of organizations themselves. Every organization exists to create value. And if you want to create value, you create value with people, you create value with your investment in people and your maybe material investment at the same time. So when people say, can it be beneficial to management and the workers at the same time? Of course, the truth is that it should be beneficial to both. In terms of business owners and investment, how would unionism be beneficial to them? Everywhere you go these days, people will tell you that no individual could be that good and that knowledgeable that you will trust them with absolute power. That, an unchecked or limited power itself can destroy even the owner of the power. So organizations need to be challenged. You need, even when you are chief executive of an organization and you don't get anybody challenging you or counter views or people telling you that maybe we shouldn't go this way, you will not like that kind of situation.
Yeah, but if we look at it, right, a business owner sets up or a manager or a management team has the responsibility to manage the business. And then they have considered so many things in making decisions. Why should they be challenged?
Well, challenging them is not in terms of how they run the business. It's usually not in terms of who they promote, who they engage. In fact, part of the cardinal principles of a trade union is that it is not their business to determine who the employer employs or how he directs his business or the strategic options that you may want to take in terms of how you go to the market and things like that. But the areas that they will be challenged is in terms of the conditions of employment of the people that they put to work. That usually is a focus of trade unionism. And when it is properly guided, you find out that as much as they take care of the interests of their people, they are also interested in the interests of the organizations, because without the organization, there won't be a branch union. It is only to the extent that the organization exists and that is doing well that they can also do well. In fact, we say often to trade unions that uh, if you kill the organization, there won't be anywhere to go to. So it is in their own interest to ensure that the organization prospers. In fact, what people are talking about, productivity, there is a way you can galvanize the workforce to be more productive, giving targets and rewarding the achievement of the targets at the same time. This has been practiced in so many countries and with success all over the world. And strikes and different industry actions should just be a means to an end when there's a breakdown in terms of communication. What a good management should do is to spell out the boundaries. When trade unionists understand, then they are not just headstrong, but they are also capable of thinking. Don't forget that a number of people that have been in trade unionism have also risen to become executives. Some of them have risen to become legislators. I don't want to give examples, but the issue is that a trade unionist needs to understand the essence of what he has to do as a trade unionist. But when a trade unionist does not have the education, he doesn't understand, then anything goes. So it is part of the responsibility of management to, in fact, educate the trade unionists.
So really, the question that I really always have unanswered is, someone had an idea, he had a vision and created an institution, and he has clarity as to how he wants to move. And he's done everything successfully to a point. And then at some point, suddenly, you have people standing up and saying, oh, we are representing the employees. Why didn't they, for instance, create the organization itself?
Well, Dr. Ogolo, you realize one thing in organization structure and every business, as a matter of fact, you have what you call stakeholders.
Yeah.
You as a business owner and as a creator, or as Nigeria call it, founder, when you have found the business, you will find out that government is a stakeholder. The society where you found the business is a stakeholder.
Absolutely.
The employees are stakeholders. Other investors that you probably have taken money from them and so on, they are stakeholders. So all of these stakeholders, they exist to help that organization create value. And when organizations create
contracts of employment are not collective.
No, when just wait a minute. When you have created the value, what happens to organization is that value is shared.
Correct.
So in sharing the value, all of those stakeholders that I mentioned to you have prayer points.
So
the shareholders will put pressure on you through maybe other shareholders to say that this is what you should give us depending on the situation of the economy. Government will put pressure on you that you should do this much because this much is given to you. Then the employees also have a responsibility to create their own prayer point, which is the union.
Yes, absolutely. So which means we can both agree that is actually when a company has succeeded that the stakeholders become much more relevant. So you would not see a situation where a company that is in its infancy, a startup, is having pressure from union or is having pressure from government. In fact, government will say you have tax break. You start paying taxes after X number of period. Pencom will say you don't have to do pension until you have X number of staff. ITF will say you don't have to do X, Y, Z. So it seems that success is what brings about or creates these entities to then come into the space.
Not necessarily, because even when you're, like you have said, when your organization is at its infancy, government gives you tax break.
Yes.
They say don't pay tax because we don't want to put pressure on you. We want you to get to table size before we start cutting. Now, for the unions as well, Often we have had situations that unions will come together and say, look, because our organization is in this state, what we need to do is not to negotiate, it's not to call for collective bargaining at so time. In fact, we have seen situations where people have gone for maybe reduction in income. It happens frequently in the construction industry. When they have lost a big contract or they have just finished a contract, you find out that they cannot keep the employees because you have to ask them to go. So they have what they call layoffs. During layoffs, unions may agree that just pay us housing allowance alone so that we'll be able to stay in our houses, so that when another business comes, when we have another contract, we can. It's important for me to do a disclaimer here that all my life I've always worked as a management person.
Absolutely.
I've never been, because sometimes when we talk about trade unionism and you give these views, people think that maybe I've been an NLC person or maybe I've been a trade unionist. Actually, as Executive Secretary of Food, Beverage and Tobacco Employers, which was the last paid employment that I had, the people confuse the role with that of a trade unionist. But because we understood the reason that you need to educate yourself and to get well informed to be able to relate with these people and the boundaries you need to set to relate with them, every employee should realize that as much as they have obligations, they also have rights. So what we tell them, the trade unionists, is that for every right you think you have, there's an obligation. If you go on the streets in Nigeria today, everybody will tell you, oh, we have this right, we have this right. They will say it is our right, it is inalienable. Those are the kind of cliches that you hear. Nobody ever tells you that we have this responsibility.
Responsibilities that comes with the rights.
Nobody tells you that you have this responsibility. So we tell them that your left hand is there, it is your responsibility, your right hand is your right.
So if we put it in management parlance, we'll say that it's actually a balance sheet. You have rights and you have obligations. So Absolutely. Don't let's just look at the rights. Let's look at the rights and obligations. And that would be a nice way to then ask you, what are the obligations of the union to the management and to its members?
Well, the obligations of the union to its members, one, is to defend them from all the insecurities that may attend their working. The obligations of the union to its members is also to sit down and get the best in terms of income for them wherever it is feasible. That is to their members. The obligation to the organization is one, to ensure that the people that they are leading do their part, do their job. As a matter of fact, it would be a shame for a trade unionist to be supporting an employee who's been found wanting in terms of performance. As a matter of fact, a lot of times when I sit to negotiate with unions, we say, look, what we are giving in terms of increase or whatever we are giving in terms of concession is an input to productivity. Once they are able to agree with that, you find out that you can use even collective bargaining to drive the performance of your organization.
Absolutely. So what is then the obligation of the member? Because if it's a right to be a part of the union, what will be the obligation of the staff to the union?
Well, the obligation of the staff to the union is not to portray the union as only interested in money or not interested in the business itself. The obligation of the member is to first be a convert in that business. That is, to be somebody who is supporting. Is their job ownership is their obligation, because it is only to the extent that they're able to demonstrate that they have job ownership can they prove that the union is not just about what we get, it is also about what we input. Owning the company. We have seen people trade unionists who will say that it is our company. But when when things are going well and they are able to do that, in fact, it's a source of pride to the management of that organization as well.
So the question therefore is, as an employee, I have a checkoff. Is that the end of my duties and responsibilities to the union? I pay every month from my salary a certain percentage that goes to the union. Do I have any obligations beyond the checkoff? And does the union have any obligation to me in terms of accountability?
Well, your checkoff, yes, you pay. But again, beyond checkoff, you also have the duty of care in terms of who becomes your union leader. Who are those people that represent you? You have an input into choosing the kind of people that will represent you, that will be your voice to management. So that's one responsibility. Secondly, you also have a duty to present the union to the management as a responsible union. Because where the union is seen to be irresponsible, there will be a problem. As an employee, you are not immune from being assessed in terms of your performance or actually being sacked, as long as it's not related to your activity as a trade unionist. If you didn't do your job well, I mean, you'll be sanctioned.
Yeah, but
even when you are
instances where that has happened,
yeah,
the union will rise and say, no, we are protecting this person.
Well, the union can rise if they're not well informed, but often, and I'll tell you, I can give you an example. When I was a human resource manager in one company in Agbara, a pharmaceutical company, big one for that matter, what we've had is that this was in the 80s. What happened then was that anytime an employee wanted to leave, because when people want to leave, when we terminate the appointment, we pay them maybe 3 months in lieu of notice. We pay them their gratuity. Those were the days of gratuity. So because they wanted to take 3 months in lieu of notice, some of them would just deliberately misbehave. And maybe they're going back to school and they want to collect that big money.
So forced to be terminated.
So it happened in this particular instance that one guy in the warehouse went to the factory floor, and the king filler, the filler that fills bottles of drinks, he just put a knife to it and cut it, and the whole product was spilling all over the place just because he wanted to leave. And when it was reported to me, I met my production manager that let us stop this matter, that this guy, we're not going to just terminate his appointment. Let us dismiss him summarily. Called in the union and said, this has happened. What do we do to this guy? He said, give him a query. We gave him a query. He said, okay, you know what? This guy did not respond to the query because he felt he was. That is a gross misconduct, and we were going to do this to him. After telling the trade unions that this was what we were going to do, the guy was summarily dismissed. He was shocked, but that brought an end to that particular kind of behavior.
So it means that there is a meeting point where the union and management can work together positively to move the organization forward.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. But it depends on the understanding of the human resource personnel or the lead of human resource function of that organization. One, to understand what trade unionism is all about, then to be able to clearly demarcate the boundaries of what their involvement will be in terms of the day-to-day activities, and to clearly tell the management that trade unionists are not masquerades. They are people that you have employed, and you should be in a position to manage their activities. Even when you are a trade union officer, that doesn't exonerate you from your own primary responsibility. So, that is number one.
Absolutely. So the primary role is to do your job, but you've put yourself forward as responsible officer and you've been elected by your colleagues to represent them. So you have additional work, but your primary role as an employee must not suffer.
Absolutely.
But then where does the protection come from? Because often we see instances where someone will say, oh, I'm going for meeting, I'm going for conference, and then they are not able to do their job.
Here's what it is, Dr. Ogunlo. For every trade union activity, especially national union, there should be a procedural agreement between the union and the group of employers. And this spells out everything. For instance, the organization that I headed, the AFBT, the procedural agreement says that you will have these conferences, the totality of the time you can be away from work for union activities, not more than maybe 7 days in a year. And the 7 days in a year is split into maybe about 3. So if you say you are going to be away, it must relate to
So
that.
those 7 days, are they annual leave consuming?
Those 7 days are not annual leave consuming, to be realistic. And how many of them? Maybe about 4 of them that can go on such leave. And we allow them those days. And they must give us at least 14 days notice before you go on. You cannot just, I can't say I have this thing to produce and you tell me you are going for union meeting.
So when there is no procedural agreement, how then does the union operate?
If there's no procedural agreement between the employer and the employee, it's a panacea for crisis, because there must be, the procedural agreement is a thing that sets the landscape, that says that, okay, you can have 4 trade unionists come for meeting, for negotiation, and you have 4 management representative come for meeting.
Or whatever number they determine.
So I'm just
example,
building that as an example that what happens in government, for instance, in public sector, is that because of the absence of this type of agreement in most cases, you find out that it is a mismatch. For instance, when you talk about the medical association and government negotiating, it's often very funny to me that you see that doctors who are in private practice are negotiating the pay of public sector doctors. So it's funny. Whereas I will only have my own employees as the people that I would discuss issues relating to their pay with. I won't be discussing with an outsider.
So let's be clear. So the union it has a branch which is probably the lowest level in the chapter, the unit. Yeah. So the unit, the state chapter, and so on and so forth, and then you have the national. Yeah. Now, at what point does the procedure come in? Is it at the smallest unit? Do they have to have a procedural process at the level of a particular company, or at the level of the state, or at the level of the national union of that industry?
Yeah, the thing is that the union is a national union.
Yeah.
Branch, unit are just subset. So it is the union that will have a procedural agreement with the employers in that group.
So if the union, which is more or less the national, has the procedural agreement, then if that business itself does not belong to an employers association, it's putting itself at risk because it doesn't have any cover of collective bargaining.
Well, if you are outside of the scheme, say you don't belong to an employers association and your workers don't belong to any union, then of course you will not be bound by any procedural agreement. But once your workers belong to a trade union, it is advised that you also belong to an employers organization, and you now form a procedural agreement that will lead to collective bargaining for the 12
months. So can a company that is not in an employers association engage in direct negotiation with staff who come together and say, oh, we are a union of so, and this is our chapter?
Under our laws, all the unions have affiliation to an industry. Nothing, as long as you are able to play it straight. Look, let's be realistic. No trade union can say because you are making maybe 50 billion in a year, therefore bring the 50 billion and let us share it. That won't happen. The management has got a responsibility to say, look, we have other stakeholders. We have other things. We have to think of the future. We have to think of investment. And these are all the places that the income is going. So in discussion and negotiation, you exchange information. Why in a house, when you make income, it's possible that one party may say, oh, now we can go and be doing O and B and be doing everything. It is left for the other person to say, you know what, we need to get a roof over our head. We need to send our children to school. We must plan this. We must plan that. So that is the responsibility of the management, to make the obtuse word to be clearer to people who may not really have the understanding that life is not just about eating and dying.
So who has the responsibility for organizing the chapter or the unit?
Well, the national union does. The employees can affiliate with a national union, and again, the national union can recognize the fact that, oh, we have our people in this particular place. Let us go and organize them, and they talk to them. And
so if someone is not interested, they say there are 10 staff in the place and one is not interested, what happens?
Well, there is absolute concept of volunteerism in trade unionism. A person can say, I don't want to be a member of the union. Nothing stops that person. Fortunately, in Nigeria, the fact that that person says, I'm not interested in being a member of the union does not mean that if the union agrees on any increase in salary or anything, that you will now say you are not going to give to that person.
So it will benefit from
It will benefit
whatever.
from it. Yeah. So, but he can say, I don't want to be a member.
So it means, okay, I don't want to be a member, so you don't take out of my money for checkoff, but then I'll benefit from whatever the union has done. Is that fair?
That's the situation. It's not everything that is fair, but I'll tell you that in our trade union setup, there's no exclusion that because you are not. In some other countries, mark you, if you are not a member, you are not supposed to benefit. But here, if you don't pay,
so is it possible to pay union salaries and non-union salaries? In which case, the union has agreed to 10,000, but okay, I can afford to pay 15. Okay, those who are not in the union, they get the 15, and the union people get the 10 they've negotiated.
Well, it will create problems for you. Why it will create problems for you is that it means that you are encouraging people not to be members. So likely everybody will say they are not members. So as to get your 15,000. But eventually they will come back to haunt you, because then you will not have a leash over their behavior, because
you're not dealing with them individually. But then you employ them individually in the first instance.
Yeah, you employ them individually, but despite that, they still exist as individuals. You treat them as individuals. You have individual files, but the issue of their combination only happens when there is collective grievance. If there is collective interest, something that brings all of them together.
And how can an employer avoid such situation? Because if you don't create an atmosphere for things to fester, it won't fester.
Well, a number of times people will say, well, if I don't want to, because of this bug about trade unionists, or this veil that unionists are this, that, it will waste your time. People have asked me if I don't want trade unions in my place, and my view is that then it means that you're really ahead of trade union standards, meaning that if the trade unions have achieved this for the employees in the industry, then it means that you must be ahead. You must do much more
Yeah, but
in terms
whatever
of
you
care
have
for
done
your
has
people.
become standard that the union can say, oh, this company can do this, all other companies can do that. Therefore, that's what we are demanding from
Well,
everybody.
you can put pressure on them, but every organization would have to pay in line with their commercial realities. You can't push. There's a concept of affordability. Can I afford it? If I can't afford it, you cannot compare me with another organization. For instance, we say compare apple with apple, compare onion with onion. You cannot say because this bank is paying X amount of money for its employees, therefore this other bank must pay. If you do that, you create problem for that particular, because the strategy of that bank may be that we just want to remain small and achieve this. This is just the niche we have carved for ourselves. So that's why it's not really the best to say you want to be you want to drive your organization to be above trade unionists, or you don't want to unionize and things like that. It could be counterproductive.
In the long shot, we can say it's safe for every organization to let people organize and foster and work with them in harmony to get the objective of the organization.
Excellent.
I want to say a big thank you for your time today, for joining us on Workplace Whispers, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Okay,
Thank you so
it's
much.
my pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.